Well, hello again, and welcome to our latest edition of the Clean Commercial Transportation Update. I'm Bill Van Amberg, joined by my great colleague Alicia Gildy. We're your hosts for this webcast. Bonnie Trowbridge is at the controls as usual, and we have Whitley Porter and Casey Okazaka who will be monitoring chat and questions. And please, if you do have questions throughout the webcast, feel free to use the question pane as questions come up. We do our best to respond. Also, a quick reminder, we will be off for next week for the Independence Day holidays here in the States. So the update will be back in 2 weeks. So don't look for us next week. But what a week this past week was. California enacted a landmark zero-emission truck rule, among many other things that happened. Our rundown is packed. Alicia, what do we have coming up?
Yes, and today's focus will be on zero-emission freight, corridors, and community impact. And I'm really excited with the lineup of speakers that we have for everyone today. Starting off, we're going to get an update on California's incentive program for zero-emission freight technologies, and we'll hear from our program manager on that. Secondly, and quite timely, we will hear about the Volvo Lights project and how that's going along with advancing zero-emission trucks. And then lastly, a first of its kind study on looking at deploying medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure along key freight corridors. And we'll be hearing from our partners from Southern California Edison on that big report. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you to take it away with industry updates.
Well, we've got a lot to pack in, and just for people who know we try to hit the half hour, we may go a little bit late today, so please bear with us. But the top story certainly of this week has been what the California Air Resources Board just approved yesterday, the first in the world zero-emission truck rule. Passed the board unanimously. It sets really aggressive sales targets starting in 2024. And the board approved really fast action to move forward on fleet rules. So it's not just a manufacturer requirement, but there will also be fleet rules that go with it. A lot of support for this rule, not just in California. There were a number of states around the nation that joined in, but let's take a look at the next slide and we'll just see, interestingly, what does this rule do? It really does set a pretty aggressive ramp up, not just over the next few years. You can see the numbers here in terms of percentages of zero-emission trucks by category, but you can also see that the rule moves out towards 2035, and part of this was structured to help support the ports here in Southern California to achieve their zero-emission drayage rules that they have targeted at 2035. I did mention the other states and regions that are in support, and it was very interesting to see, particularly the Northeast. Paul Miller, who is the executive director of NESCOM, representing a number of states in the Northeast region, spoke in support of the rule, partly because of the emissions that they do have in the on-road sector. But there was support from a number of other states, including the state of Washington here on the West Coast. So maybe you'll get a chance later to talk about what states may be next in line to follow on with the act. Other news regarding some of these adoptions of tough standards, Nevada has signaled that they will be the latest state to adopt California's clean vehicle rules, including zero-emission vehicle rules for cars. They're talking about enacting that by 2025. So going to other news that we see, other vehicles being launched. And this is interesting because part of the rule in California will be for pickups and vans, and a new Lordstown Motors pickup, the Endurance, was unveiled officially yesterday in Lordstown, Ohio, where it will be built in a former General Motors plant. Vice President Mike Pence actually joined in that, which is an interesting signal, as so far the administration has really not been supporting incentives for these vehicles. Interesting work in Europe also. As zero-emission buses move forward, a lot of people are looking, particularly where it's not so much of a public transit agency, but a privately operated one. What's the best way to get the business case going? An interesting battery firm called Zenob Energy is launching battery leasing. This has been talked about a lot, but they're really moving forward with an investment strategy to do it, so that the bus operators will buy the electric bus, but lease the batteries from this battery company, and also have the charging provided as a service in the package. They think this will actually boost sales in the United Kingdom. There's also a lot of work going on throughout Europe with electric buses being deployed, and Siemens has been putting in infrastructure for those purposes. They've just launched 2 new installations in Germany. Germany has not been quite as fast to follow with electric buses, but now starting to put more and more on the road. These installations will have overhead charging so that they can be charged at depots and also operate with fast charge in Leipzig and in Nuremberg. One last thing, we keep talking about where is electric technology going, and another place where e-aviation is getting off the ground is in the United Kingdom. This is their first commercial scale electric aircraft. And interestingly, in this one, it was not a battery electric design, but one using a fuel cell. And in fact, they're looking at possibilities of 10 to 20 passenger flights in the next 3 years and ranges up to around 300 miles. So interesting where that technology is going. So a lot going on over the past week. Let's take a closer look now at some of the issues in our next segments that dive deeper into what's really making it happen on the ground to make these capabilities launch out into broader acceptance. Alicia.
Great, thank you so much, Bill. Wonderful rundown there. Yes, I'm delighted to introduce our colleague, Nikki Okuk, who's the program manager for our Clean Off-Road Equipment Voucher Incentive Project. We have some important updates to share, Nikki, as well as we would like to talk about how we're looking at advancing zero-emission technologies to help benefit communities. So, Nikki, welcome. Great to have you.
Thank you very much. So the Clean Off-Road Voucher Incentive Project, for those of you who may not know, is very similar to the HVIP program, which has been going for a decade in California, in that it's a really easy to use voucher program that provides like a point of sale discount to really buy down the cost of this new cleaner technology and pay the incremental difference between your traditional diesel or internal combustion equipment. Right now, we're very specifically focused on the equipment that is used in freight. So think about rail car movers or transportation refrigeration units, the container handling equipment and heavy duty forklifts that you would find in ports and rail yards and distribution centers across the state. So as of today, we have subscribed about half of the original $41 million in voucher incentives. That's 200 vouchers that have been deployed, and we have a remaining funding of $18 million. And you can always find all of this information on our website at californiacorps.org. You can get updates on where the program is. But a few just really important ones that I want to share with folks. We've recently updated our implementation manual, so that was released. That's available on the website, and that was based on stakeholder feedback and public work groups. We will also be holding another public work group coming up at the end of the month here on June 30th, 2020, and then we're going to follow that up with a webinar, which is going to be an opportunity to learn about some of the technology that's in the program, an opportunity to learn about how to get voucher requests in or get additional equipment qualified. I would urge everyone that's listening, though, to get in contact with me or the other program staff here if you're interested, because we really do expect to be fully subscribed within about the next 45 days. So please reach out to us and keep up to date on the website again, which is californiacorps.org. Next slide. Oh, so I'd like to also update all of you on something that I think is really interesting and important, which is that we have included in this program some plus-up incentives, which means you can get about a 10% additional value on your voucher if the equipment is deployed in designated DACs, disadvantaged communities, or AB 1550 low-income communities. They're designated on the Cal EnviroScreen website, and I'm happy to say that to date, close to 70% of the vouchers that we've deployed have been deployed in these communities.
Great, Nikki, thank you so much for that update. And I know there's so much to cover and you did a great job there. I would love to hear from you, since this is a market acceleration program, how is CORE advancing the marketplace for zero emission technologies?
I think we've really learned that these sort of easy to use voucher incentive programs like CORE and HVIP, they send really great signals to manufacturers so that they can move forward in their investments to develop and really bring this type of equipment to market. So we found that there were OEMs that maybe had not necessarily been thinking about this type of equipment being commercially viable, and they were very happy to see that this program came forward, and it makes them more excited to get this technology out on the market. And then sending those signals sort of over the long term is also super important, having no stop and start signals so that our end users, our buyers, and the OEMs can have a cost-effective entry point to these types of technologies and something that they can count on year over year.
Very good. Well, and I also really appreciated just seeing this deployment map and how that will benefit disadvantaged communities. And of course, the intent of this project was really looking at how can we reduce freight emissions from communities that are living nearby. And would love to know, how does the core project take an equity lens to advance its goals, to make sure that it is in fact benefiting communities? Can you share a little bit with us on how that's done?
Yeah, I think that a really interesting perspective on this is that so much of this work has actually been made possible because of these communities advocating for themselves and for their health. A lot of us come to this work thinking about GHG emissions and climate change, but in reality, so much of the action around this, the funding, the legislature, the policy, has all been because of this really strong advocacy coming from these communities. So I think that when we run these types of programs, we really have to try to take the position that what we're trying to do is deliver on a promise, right? We're delivering on the promise of accelerating these technologies and getting this cleaner technology deployed sooner and faster and in the places that need it most.
Well, Nikki, you're doing a fantastic job. We're so lucky to have you on our team. Keep up the great work. And Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you because you are actually going to be highlighting now a project that's deploying a zero-emission truck. So keeping with the theme of zero-emission freight technologies, I'll hand it over to you.
These technologies are moving really fast. And Nikki, thank you so much. We're really proud of what the core program has done and Nikki's leadership on it. But you're right, Alicia, in light of the ACT rule, one of the major transformative projects underway right now is Volvo Lights, a major demonstration of heavy electric tractors and straight trucks by Volvo and a really broad team. We're really proud to be part of that project, and our project manager for that effort is Kelly Leathers. Kelly will be joining us to give an overview of the project, and then we'll also be joined in a bit by Volvo VP of Government Relations and Public Affairs, Dawn Fenton, who is also a CALSTART board member. She'll give us some of the latest updates right after Kelly. But Kelly, let's start with you. Can you give us an overview of this project and what it's trying to achieve?
Sure. So the Volvo Lights project is a very large and comprehensive project that involves a ton of very important partners, as you can see on this slide. But I mean, for starting off, this project wouldn't be possible without the combined funding from California Climate Investments, South Coast Air Quality Management District, and Volvo Group. I think the shining star is obviously, electric Class 8 Volvo VNR truck that is being demonstrated and deployed at 3 facilities within the Southern California region. So we have DHE located in Ontario, NFI in Chino, and Tech Equipment in Fontana. So obviously this is really exciting for industry, but I think the really unique thing about this project is it's not only looking at the trucks, but also looking at a comprehensive solution to efficient freight movement. So these facilities will be getting these trucks in addition to that off-road electric equipment such as yard hostlers, forklifts. Green Lots, one of our project partners, has been coordinating with Southern California Edison to install the charging infrastructure for these trucks, the off-road equipment, as well as workplace charging at these facilities for the employees and guests to utilize. On top of all that great work, they're also installing solar arrays at these facilities to offset the energy use from the vehicles as well as the facilities. That's a lot of great work, and there's so much more that goes into this project that can't really be covered in one fell swoop. But Casey, I believe she linked the website if you'd like to learn more, or feel free to reach out to me with any questions. If you can go to the next slide, I'd like to just show some images of these vehicles. So we have the beautiful VNR truck there at Tech Equipment, and then the off-road yard trucks at DHE in Ontario, and that they have actually been running since later last year, and then also the forklift that have just been delivered and will be in use hopefully by the end of the month. So this project has been really interesting. We're learning a lot, and I think that it will be a great roadmap for facilities that are looking to be more efficient in the goods movement space. So yeah, thanks.
Oh, Kelly, thank you so much. And I think it's so great to see actually the vehicles on the ground and to see them starting to roll. I know we've had an exciting part in this project, really helping with some of these distribution centers and how they can electrify some of their other operations. So thanks. We're now very pleased to have Dawn Fenton join us. And I mentioned we're also proud to have Dawn as a board member here at CALSTART. Don, what's the latest now with Volvo Lights? You've reached a couple of milestones over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for the project. It was just last week, I think, that we had a press release from the project that the first electric VNR was out on the roads. Actually, it has been operating for a couple of weeks already, but we had the press release announcing that the truck and the charging infrastructure was complete finally at that first location at Tech Equipment, which is in Fontana, California, the picture that was just shown. So, and they have two 50 kilowatt chargers and 150 kilowatt chargers. So that's all set. And then also this week was what we had an event. Well, it wasn't our event. It was an event at the Leonard Transportation Center at Cal State University at San Bernardino. It was a webinar on getting ready for electric commercial fleets, and that was a great event. We had, in addition to our own Arvin Kailas, who was moderating, we had representatives from Greenlots and ABB and Trillium, and really talking about the importance of starting early to reach out to utilities and things that you need to be thinking about if you are interested in looking at deploying some of these all-electric trucks. So yeah, it's amazing. There's just stuff going on every week.
Well, and I think some of the learnings and lessons are really so transmittable to others who are getting into this. Where are you going next? So what is towards the end of the year? What are we going to see grow in the project?
Yeah, as I said, there's always something going on. And so, you know, we have the first 5 trucks have been out there for a little while, and before the end of the summer, all 5 of those will be running. We'll be completing all the charging infrastrucstructure at the fleets at DHE and NFI, and those will be running. And then before the end of the year, we'll have the additional 3 pilot trucks that are out going out there. And then in the beginning of the new year, we'll already have some of the remaining. We'll start having the remaining 15 trucks that are going to be leased to different customers, so that they can kind of test them out. So, and that's one of the nice things about this project is, of course, we have NFI and DHE that are core partners, but being able to lease some of these trucks out to some other fleets so that they can kind of test out this technology and learn firsthand what it's like to operate these kinds of trucks. So that'll be starting right in the new year.
That's outstanding, and that it really is necessary to start getting these into the hands of real customers, seeing how they work, and it's so great that you can touch so many more.
Absolutely, yeah, we're very excited.
One last question for you. In your
Yep.
mind, what is the biggest takeaway or takeaways to date?
I guess the biggest takeaway is to have patience. It's complicated, and you know, it's amazing that things take longer than you expect, and sometimes you just can't, you know, that story, you just can't make this stuff up, you know. I mean, because there can be delays that have everything to do with you know, what you might expect, but then there can be delays just in weather, you know, that delays construction that you can't plan for, or like a pandemic that comes and forestalls things.
Right.
So, yeah, just that. So I think really the key learning is to be patient and to start early and to keep a good sense of humor and a smile on your face.
All right. Well, you have been effectively doing that. So thanks so much for joining us, Dawn, and giving us that update. Really appreciate that. And we want to continue to work with you to help make sure that these lessons and learnings get out to the world, because it's really the leading edge going on here in many ways.
We really appreciate CALSTART's partnership. Thanks for having us on to talk about it today.
You bet. Thanks, Dawn. Well, you know, one of the big issues that everybody wants to talk about is infrastructure when it really comes into scaling for this growth in zero-emission commercial vehicles. So, Alicia, you've got a pretty important new report that we want to highlight.
Yes, absolutely. And it's great. I just love our lineup today, because even talking about the Volvo Lights project, these are the trucks that are going to be deployed along clean freight corridors in California and along the West Coast. So I am so excited to introduce our partner here, Eric Sala, who's a senior manager with the e-mobility team with Southern California Edison, to talk about an unprecedented report, this great collaboration among 9 utilities and 2 organizations representing 12 municipal utilities to evaluate opportunities to deploy medium and heavy duty charging along key freight corridors, such as the I-5 from the border of Mexico all the way up to the border of Canada. So Eric, great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. wanted to get a sense from you, what were the top 3 takeaways, the top 3 learnings from this effort?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited about this study. I'll talk a little bit about the infrastructure recommendations in the study and then some of the other recommendations dealing with the market itself. So the core of the study really recommends a hypothetical deployment of electric vehicle charging for not only freight haulers, but also delivery trucks at regular intervals along Interstate 5 and 9 other adjoining highways. So the first phase of this hypothetical implementation would involve 27 separate charging sites along I-5, placed at 50-mile intervals, each with around 10 350 kilowatt chargers, really focused on servicing medium-duty electric vehicles, such as delivery vans, through 2025. Later, 14 of those 27, so every other site, would be expanded to also accommodate 10 2-megawatt chargers, specifically for Class 8 electric big rigs by 2030. So that's just on the 5 freeway. The study also recommended and identified an additional 41 sites along the other corridors, deployed in a similar 50-mile alternating fashion out through 2030. So there's a lot of information that went into figuring out those infrastructure deployments. And so I definitely recommend getting the study. I'll put a link to it in the Q&A chat box for everybody to go check it out. But the infrastructure is really the attractive part of it. But the study recommends a number of other findings and recommendations. So one is really being proactive on the system planning side. The study identified a disconnect between utility lead times to build this infrastructure and when sites and vehicles may be deployed. And so we found that capacity is fine through 2025 to service those medium and heavy duty sites, but out to 2030, you're looking at 23.5 megawatt sites. And so the lead time to build the infrastructure for that is long and may not match up, the utility lead time may not match up with the expectations from the trucking market. Because of this, the study recommends leveraging the utility role to enhance collaboration across all of the stakeholders. Utilities can also educate, formalize standards, and really help accelerate adoption. And then finally, the study reiterated something that we all know, that infrastructure costs and vehicle costs are still a significant barrier. And so establishing a robust, dependable, and long-term funding solution for both of those segments is going to be essential to move this market forward.
Wow, that is absolutely incredible, and thank you for sharing that with us. Now that SCE has this great study and analysis and some strong recommendations in terms of how to proceed, how does Southern California Edison plan to take this forward?
Absolutely. So this study is really just a first step. As I mentioned, it's a hypothetical deployment, but really helps contribute to the discussion. What's unique about this is we coordinated across utilities and across states. And so each one of those utilities has its own internal planning processes. And SCE specifically is reassessing its internal planning to identify those gaps in timing barriers, how we communicate forecasted loads to regulators in order to get approval to start almost pre-building these sites with the expectation that the load will be appearing in the future. I think it's also important to know that we're not only looking internally, we're looking externally. There's a really great collaboration going on across utilities throughout the country, specifically spurred by the announcement by Amazon to be deploying thousands of electric delivery vans, as well as, potentially a number of heavier duty vehicles. And so the coordination in the utility industry is really going to be a key role in not having utilities be a barrier to this deployment. And so that's something that SCE wants to spearhead, not only for itself in California, but also nationally, and sharing the information that we've been able to come up with through the programs that we've implemented to date.
Eric, well, that's fantastic. And we did have the opportunity to talk with Katie Sloan earlier this week about how this program can be replicated, how we can take the learnings from this study and use it as a template. So we had the great pleasure of talking to Katie, Sloan, who is the director of the e-mobility and building electrification program at Southern California Edison. Bonnie, can we share that interview?
We are hopeful that this will be a template to be used across the U.S. For other utilities and states to see how they can electrify. And the other big thing that we're doing here is it's not so much of an if you build it, they will come. We have a plan. We know how we can execute. And I think that this will help, especially in hopefully Oregon and Washington, to get additional investment in EV infrastructure, to say it's not just one project here or one project there, but we know how we should be rolling this out now over the next 5 to 10 years.
So it creates a real template for cross-regional cooperation, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, well, that's great, and it's been an honor to be a partner to this project. CALSTART has been extremely proud of the effort and what's come out of the results of the study, and certainly appreciate your perspective on how this can be replicated in other regions. I think as we're looking at advancing alternative fuel corridors and transportation electrification along corridors, coordinating with critical stakeholders like utilities is absolutely paramount. How do you recommend we engage with utilities in other regions to consider a study like this? And what might be some barriers that would kind of hold coordination back a little? How might we address those barriers?
Yeah, I say we start with the low-hanging fruit. We've already had a few different states and utilities reach out to us. The one that's coming to mind, I can't remember which utility it was, but Nevada has already reached out to us. I think what makes sense to me strategically is to start with adjoining states, and then also the coasts. Start where we already know that there's interest, and walk people through the study. We do this a lot. Southern California Edison does this a lot with sister utilities across the U.S. on our transportation electrification efforts. And we've seen, especially on the East Coast, people replicating very similar programs to the one that we have. And I think that's the beauty of working at utilities. There's obviously challenges, but one of the benefits is that we aren't as concerned with competitive advantage, and so we're able to do a lot more sharing. And so I think having utility partners at the table, being willing to spend the time with new utilities that are interested in doing these types of studies is the opportunity, and partnering with organizations like CALSTART to do that, and being able to replicate that so that we don't have to have the same conversation many different times, just create the information so that more people can share it. The barrier, I'd say, it always comes down to money, right? That's when we look at execution, that's what it comes down to. So I think, being able to demonstrate and show where things have worked, and working with utilities, they know what is going to be persuasive in their state, with their constituents, and it's going to be different, I think, across the U.S., but that's one of the things that I've seen really exciting about transportation electrification is even in the South, there's where maybe environmental justice isn't the same conversation that you'd be having in California, there's benefit to ratepayers. There's also economic development. So I think providing the tools for utilities to be able to work with their commissions and their regulators from the perspective and the angle that they know will help them get funding is a challenge.
Well, Bill, it was great having that opportunity to talk with Katie and to get her perspective on how we can take this great study, of which CALSTART has been pleased to be a partner along with HDR, S-Curve, and Ross Strategic on this partnership to work with Eric and his team, along with all the other utilities and municipal utilities. Now, I believe we also have a poll that we're trying to fit in here before we wrap up for today. And
let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot.
Yes, let's go ahead and pull that up, Bonnie. With the great announcement yesterday around the advanced clean truck rule, we want to hear from you. Where do we think it will go next? Where do we see the next ACT rule to be in effect? Is it Colorado, Illinois, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, or Washington? Let us know what you think.
We don't have an all of the above button, which of course you might apply as well, but at least this will give us an idea of where you think the hot spots might be.
All right, let's see what folks think, Bonnie. All right, New York.
Wow.
Pretty impressive. 48% believe New York is the next location for an ACT role. Well, thanks everyone.
But look
for
at that. By the way, I just shared Washington, 25% would be in number 2. That's really interesting. That West Coast state has really been moving along fast. Well, we're at the time again. We've run through it in a half an hour so quickly. Incredibly busy week. Great webcast today, and really thank our guests. Just as a reminder, there will be no update next week as we celebrate July 4th, but we do plan to send a survey out to all of you. We'd really love to get your feedback on how we're doing, what more you'd like to see and learn about as we work to stay more connected than ever. And if I can offer one moment of reflection at the end of this really busy week, yesterday's approval by California of this very aggressive zero-emission truck rule is really a world-leading event in the battle on climate change, but also clean air in our most affected cities and communities. We're very proud of the role that CALSTART has played with this, along with our members, our stakeholders, and others in reaching this milestone. But I think it's important to reflect, this is not the end of the battle, rather it's really the beginning of the real big next phase of work. So as we celebrate this, we also acknowledge the path ahead that we all must work on: infrastructure, incentives, supporting state, regional, and city policies, and support for fleet and job training for new technicians. All of these are needed. So we must really pledge to work together now, harder than ever, to implement the capability we've all worked so hard to create. We're ready for this work, and we've started launching already, so we want to work with you on it. That's our update for the week. For Alicia Gildy and our whole Clean Commercial Transportation team and our guests today, I'm Bill Van Amberg. Thanks for joining us. Be safe, stay healthy, and have a great 4th of July. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Goodbye for now.